Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. My name is Cassandra, and today I would like to address you in regards to my platform to become President of the United States of America. This is my vision of what I believe America can achieve if we work together to become the America of our highest ideals. I would like to start with the idea of what America stands for. I want America to take on the archetype of a well-faring stewardship in which we become a nation of stewards and we take on the responsibility of stewarding our lives, our homes, our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our towns, our states, and our entire nation, and the planet Earth itself. And in this way, we are doing the good, hard, and necessary work to achieve a criterion level standard of living in America for all people here in order to make sure that everyone lives in a way in which America works for everyone and nobody is getting disadvantaged, nobody's getting left behind or kept behind, and everybody lives the good life. Stewardship essentially means to secure the proper management of that which is entrusted to our care. And we are taking on responsibility of the lives of the people who are here now in America and those who are to come, to make sure that they are taken care of, that they can fare well in their lives, and that America becomes a secure situation that is welcoming, in which everyone can thrive on together. The sense of having this type of identity for us to all relate to now gets us all in a position where we can be on the same page with one another. Who are we as Americans? We're stewards. We're stewarding our lives, we're stewarding our homes, we're stewarding our neighborhoods and our communities, we're stewarding our towns and our cities, we're stewarding our states, we're stewarding the entire nation, and we're stewarding the planet. This is something that we all can agree on, that this is the proper intended use for our efforts, and we know why we do the good, hard, and necessary work that we do, is to achieve the outcomes that actualize those things in which we say are our initiatives to achieve well-faring stewardship. And so the sense of how do we secure a situation everyone can thrive on, to be able to say that everybody is faring well in their lives, well, we have a few tangible frameworks that we need to build up, and a few modelings of scaffolding that people can assume in their lives to help to level up their lives so that they can ascend into this sense of a criterion standard of living in America, in which everybody is living the good life. Now, what the good life looks like is going to be different for everybody. It's no different than the concept of pursuit of happiness. It's going to be different for everyone. But nevertheless, people have to have the means to pursue that happiness and to pursue that good life. And that's what we're working towards, is to create that situation in which we welcome people into the experiences and the encounters and the events and every opportunity that we can provision, accommodate, steward, support, provide for, and care for, in order for people to be able to take on the responsibility of actualizing their best version in society and live out the best experiences that they know. And for us to create that environment by which they can achieve the status of their highest potential. And the reason why we want this is because when we know everybody is secure in their situation of their lives, we don't have to worry about others. And then we're fulfilling that sense of the original spirit of intent of our nation, independence. We wanted sovereignty and independence and self-governance. And this was the way we were going to achieve a smaller government that had less control and capacity to intervene or intercede on behalf of the individual, because the individual was well capable to provide these things for themselves, and others were able to do that as well. And so we are less conflicting with one another because we're each autonomously self-sovereign, self-reliant, free and independent people. That was the ultimate goal as to why we formed our nation, was to make sure that we didn't need to have a large government coming in and imposing its will upon us. The will of the people was the ultimate power, where the ultimate power rests. And so in order to achieve the best version of our form of a democratic republic, we need to achieve that sensibility of empowering the individual, empowering independence. And we do that by creating that environment, this situation in which all people can be fostered in a sense of being able to live the good life. And so some of the initiatives that I believe that we need to take on in order to build up the capacity for us to be able to set people free in their liberty to pursue their happiness however they may choose. We have to have some tangible frameworks of securing that situation in which everybody can thrive on. And these are the things that we should be working towards. Instead of the piecemeal solutions that we have been trying to get at from various ways, and, new administrations come in and they have a different sense of, what they want to accomplish, and they push us and pull us in one direction or another. And we're being pulled apart at the seams, and nobody seems to have any great common cause to which to work towards together. And so we're exhausting ourselves and our resources and our time and our effort and energy doing stuff that is not having the compounding effects of, applying ourselves to something that we can build tangibly together. And so this is about getting ourselves on the same page, getting ourselves into that capacity to establish a criterion echelon of society. And for us to all assume the responsibility of maintaining and caring for and managing that which is entrusted to ourselves, which is our own personal lives, the lives of our children, our home spaces and personal property, and then respecting that same capacity for other people to have, and to not impose or infringe on other people's liberties and freedoms. And to come into a sense of this is what is expected of us in a civil society. And so once we start working on these things together, we're going to have this cohesive sense of collaboration and cooperation, and we build up a natural coherence that achieves a consensus building effort that over time becomes the living answer to how do we form a more perfect union. And so what I'm looking at here is a means of really reorienting ourselves in terms of how we structure society, what our infrastructures looks like, our education, our innovations, these sorts of things, and how our economy is functioning in order to have a cohesive, proper intended use of it all, to achieve a type of a end result or outcome from each one of these variable conditions that make up the standard of the American situation that we're all living in. So it's a proper intended use for our government, proper intended use for our policies in government, proper intended use for our economy, and proper intended use for the laws that are created, and a sense of we have a purpose and we have to behave as proper citizens in order to achieve our purpose and to make sure that other people can achieve their purpose as well. And so some of these initiatives are taken in their own individual way as being self-standing supports in which they alone will have a profound shift and change in improving the human condition in the American situation. But when you take them in the broader context, you see how they all interrelate with one another, and it's taking an omnidirectional outcome engineering approach to working these different components together into a vast synthesis of achieving that which we would want to have as outcomes, which is to make sure America works for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so that nobody gets left behind or kept behind, and everybody lives the good life and they are faring well in their lives. And so the initiatives have their own individual sensibilities and proper intended use, but they are brought into the overarching goal of the proper intended use of helping us to get a tangible sense of the American identity. And the American identity is to become a nation of stewards. We want to become welfaring stewards, securing our personal lives and the lives of those to which we are responsible for, and to have a capacity to have stewardship over the planet, stewardship over our resources that we have as a nation, and stewardship over the future, in a sense of like, we have the capacity to create outcomes in the future to which we will eventually come into the outcome consequences of it, and we want those consequences to be positive. So all of these things come together, and they come together with intention, even though they seem individuated and separate. They're each a small puzzle piece in a much grander picture. And what I'm trying to do here is just to give you a basic framework in order for you to kind of like get your bearings in terms of what I'm talking about, because this is something that is a vast synthesis in my mind I have been working on for a very long time. And I could sit here and go on for hours about it. I will try to keep it as brief as I can. But I want to be able to contextualize things so you can kind of like see the edge and follow along and be able to get a basis of like foundational grounding and say, okay, I can see how that can build up to something much greater. Or, you know, I can see the edge of this so we're not getting too far out in the weeds. I can see that there's structure and there's order. And when you start to see that within the policies and the initiatives that I am suggesting here, you're going to be able to start to kind of get a general idea of the vision of the future that I see that is to come, that I want to, you know, invite everybody into that welcoming situation with me. I know where I'm going in terms of these things that I'm bringing about, and I just want to invite you to come along too. So with that, I want to start with one of my favorite initiatives. It's called the Maker's Mall. And essentially it's reimagining and rebuilding our education system. The education system as it is now is completely broken. It does not do what it's supposed to do. And we should want the proper intended use of our education system to transform everyone into lifelong learners. And we should have welcoming environments conducive to people becoming lifelong learners, and to be able to apply themselves to learn through experiential learning, how to bring out this natural innate skills, talents, and abilities that they have, to build up on others, and to shift from one subset of learning modalities to shift it into another version, and then to be able to bring that all together in terms of helping everybody to kind of become, as they used to call it, the Renaissance person. You can do everything to a capacity where you're proficient enough in it. And then for you to continuously seek refinement so that you become master of your craft. And through experiential learning, you find what your craft is. You find what you're good at. You try on different versions of yourself in terms of applying yourself in real world settings to do certain specific things and tasks. And you see if that's the thing that you sense is like you're really good at that. And it's something you can see yourself continuing to do. And you find where you can be and give your talents in best service to the world. And learning is also about enhancing the human experience, getting ourselves into a sense of knowing ourselves and knowing each other, knowing our planet, knowing our history, knowing where we come from, knowing where we're going. And when we have that type of understanding, excuse me, we are able to bring ourselves into a different type of experience. And so what we want to have as an outcome for education is where people become informers and they become insightful, and that the number one thing that they are able to give in service is their version of insight. And so it's not necessarily meaning that you're going to parrot off answers to things in a formalized test, but it's more you apply yourself practically in a form of an experience, and you show your work, you show your stuff, and you prove yourself capable of achieving different various levels of mastery. And so this does away with the sense of needing to have grade education, systems in terms of, you're in first grade, second grade, third grade. Those are they kind of defeat the whole purpose of education. It's not about conforming you to, a model of this is what you should be learning at each one of these stages, but rather, where are you at? And we meet you where you're at, and we help to give you the next step so you take that leap forward, and you're challenging the person and the individual on an individual basis to get to the next level of excellence that they can achieve themselves. And it's not, a competition, it's an exploration. It's not about, you must be at this level at this time in this way, because we don't want to hold people back. But we also want to understand that some people are a little bit slower at learning certain things. I mean, you think about Albert Einstein was terrible at math, but look what he went on to do in terms of transforming his way of assimilating the concepts of mathematics, and helped us to be able to create a theory for general relativity. So everybody has their own pace and their own interests and their own interesting, unique way of perceiving the world. And our education should really be about tapping into that, finding the modalities that work best for you to assimilate and incorporate and truly fundamentally understand information, so that you can translate that into actionable things. And so instead of having classrooms where everybody around the same age group goes into the same classroom and you sit in front of a teacher that tells you all the same thing, we have learning centers called makers malls. And it's essentially like a regular mall, a shopping mall, and reimagined that each one of these storefronts are actually different learning opportunities. They're different experiences you can enter into, and you can learn various subjects and ideas and practical talents and skill building in these environments. And it's not based off of age, it's based off of your willingness to learn, whether you have learned the prerequisites and passed a certain standard of those things. And it's not a matter of holding you back or you can't apply at certain times. It's like at your own pace. And so if you want to get through it fast, you can. If you want to take your time and pace it, you can. And it's not a competition to get you at a certain level. It's an exploration of what fascinates you, what's interesting to you, and where are your struggles. And this is where it's very important that we don't have grades and age groups that are confined in terms of learning. We learn best from each other, all ages, learning together in the same environment, the same topics, but at different levels of mastery. And so we learn and teach one another. You have a novice working with, a level 10 master, and the two are teaching one another because the novice may have, the scout mindset. It's like, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm on my way, and I'm going to discover it. And maybe they have a way of looking at things that, the old master like never thought of before, or forgot, how to look at things this way. And so they learn from one another and their different levels that they are at in terms of understanding. And they help to communicate with one another and teach one another through tangible, hands-on, practical experience. And when we learn together, then we transcend the barriers of thinking that society is, there's an inferior or superior form based off of an age group. Those start to like go away, and it's really literally just about who you are, how you choose to show up, and what you're best at. And it's no longer in terms of competition of, whether or not you make it in math but you don't make it in reading or something to that effect. It's literally about you going through an exploration and leveling yourself up to wherever you find the interest. And you're not put against anybody else in terms of, who's better or who's best. It's like, what's the way for you to better improve yourself and get you to your best level? And then you can mentor other people, and it's not a sense of, feeling smart or stupid, inadequate or highly capable, and then letting that have some sensibility of impacting, who you are as an individual. Like, those things kind of alleviate themselves over time as we enter in this type of experiential learning. And we really just realize, like, this is life, and this is how we learn best, is from each other. Like, babies learn from their parents. That's how you learn how to communicate. That's how you learn how to walk, and how you talk, and how you eat, how you take care of yourself. You learn from others. And so when you're in an environment with diverse people from all walks of life, and from many different cultural and ethnicity backgrounds and different age groups, we no longer have problems of ageism or like, canceling somebody out because you think, oh, you're too young, you can't know any better, or you're so old, you must know all the answers. That's not necessarily true. And so this creates a welcoming situation in which all people can come in where they're at, and through experience learn however they best can. And so makers malls will have to be built in communities, and they have to be strategically placed so that they are accessible within a reasonable time frame range of transporting people to these locations. And they need to be large enough to accommodate anybody at any age group at all walks of life. And within these areas, we can have early childhood education and child development programs that serve as, what we modern day call child care. But it's educational learning experiences for parents and would-be parents and caregivers to help children to learn how to, become thriving adults at the various stages of life, and then help parents to understand those various stages so that when they go home, they can, teach their children well. And then it provides a chance of on-site childcare for a parent to be able to go do their experiential learning while their child is in childcare. And then having the just like a regular mall has like a food court, people would be able to have an opportunity to get food there. There'll be settings for private studies in various areas where people can group and congregate. There'll be inside libraries. A lot of the experiential learning will be practical hands-on stuff, like areas where you can do, home economics, you can do woodworking and carpentry, you can do machinist work, you can do leather working, you can learn how to sew, you can do welding, any one of the various things. Another great one would be learning how to work on HVAC systems and electrical and plumbing and, all of the like vocational type of jobs, hands-on that are really going to be very enduring jobs for a very long time, because these require a certain level of expertise that, while it might be supported by like an AI system in terms of, getting a library of, vast knowledge to know how to do something, the practical applicability of doing this type of tangible work is going to be able to be passed off onto a robot with, an artificial intelligence anytime soon. So we need to build, and we're in short supply. There's so many like journeymen that are like aging out, and there's not enough young people replacing them. And a lot of people like think that these types of jobs are not, big money and, worth doing or whatever, because everybody's trying to like get in a position where they get a really good paying job, and so they don't think of this type of work. But when we create a situation in which it's less about how much you get paid, and it's more about this is where you are really good in terms of service, and then people can accept that type of work without having to take a cut on their lifestyle, then we can get more people involved in wanting to sign up for that type of work. That leads into another program called the Might of Great Care Package, which essentially just makes it so that we create a care package system for all people to tap into in terms of a resource commons, and they can like pick their own perk program in terms of what they need care for. If they need childcare for when they go to work, if they need to have a life loan system so that they can get a loan that can help pay for their bills every month, and then they just pay it back so that they know their bills are always on time. If they need a down payment access for getting a home or getting a vehicle, if they need to go to a university for education, whereas the Maker's Mall is a lifelong learning experience, and there will definitely be tangible, certifications and, actual forms of having like a degree and whatnot. It's not going to detract away from regular colleges and universities where people could opt in to be able to go to those schools as well, so they can get that type of accreditation. And so we can help get access for people to be able to get into those programs as well. Various types of healthcare at different levels, vision, dental, these sorts of things, and retirement funds, funding to be able to go on vacation, be able to take sick leave, these sorts of things. So it's a matter of like picking what form of support you need, and to be able to tap into that, kind of like a credit system of like you have so many credits that you get to draw on, per enrollment period, and you get to choose which option you want to have in that time period, and you accustom it to your needs, suit your needs of now. Like, you're a young person, and you're single and you have no children, and you want to go to school, you can gear your system to be able to do that. If you are getting ready to start a family and you want to prepare to, have children, and you want to be able to up level into a new house, you can pick your system, your supports within the system to gear up for that. And there's a baseline standard to make sure that, everybody has what they need in order to fare well, which all people need to have a baseline standard of health care in order to be well. And so you can have that, you can level it up to get more optimal choices in terms of what type of health care that you want. And when we have this type of system, the main reason is because this is how we create that criterion standard for all people to live the good life. You have the bare necessities of life accessible to you, and you get to pick, the perks that are going to help you to approach your life with the support that you need, like a scaffolding for you to build upon to achieve more wealth growth in certain areas. And it's, because you get to pick it, you get to design it to suit your needs instead of these are your options, and you take what you get and you don't throw a fit sort of thing. It's like there's a way for you to work with that system. It's optional, and it's something that you can work on, and you can make it in by a design to really work for the type of lifestyle that you're trying to live for yourself. And we're all working together to collectively cultivate and foster and grow and expand what the Might of Great Care package does, how much it can extend to people, and what it looks like, how it translates in terms of what everybody gets in distributing these resources that we accumulate together. And this helps because it gives a baseline standard for like small businesses to not have to meet the harsh environment of competing with large corporations that can afford to do, like benefits programs for their employees. Small companies can't do that. And so their employees can't necessarily make their way in life by working a job for a small business with a meager wage, but they can't access healthcare and these sorts of things. So this helps to make it so more able-bodied people are capable of working. It makes them able to be participants and contributors to the workforce, because the variable in terms of them choosing to work is not based off of whether or not that's going to be enough for them to live off of and get by, because they have this Might of Great Care package in which they can have a benefits program that is for all people, and they can tap into that, and they can adjust it as they need to in order to work the jobs that they seek to pursue. And the Maker Small helps to educate people so they're skilled and they're capable workers, and a lot of that work can translate over because it's practical things. Like, they know hands-on how to do that work already because they performed it in the Maker Small. And in those environments within the Maker Small, like, it's not just about applying yourself to do something, but you're actually making stuff too. And that's why it's called a Maker Small. So you go in there and you're welding something together, and it's a tangible product that you yourself could then translate into a source of income for yourself. Or you can work with a small business that contracts you to do this work together in the education setting, and then that small business purchases it, and then what is returned into the system helps to fund the program for the Maker Small to sustain. So we can eventually get to the point where these schools are maintaining themselves in terms of funding, because their funding is coming from the things which they are actually building and then outputting. And so when we're translating also to tangible work where somebody is becoming master of their craft, being a welder, and then a small business sees the work that they're doing, they're like, we just want to in-house have somebody do welding, then they can hire on into that position where they may not necessarily have had work experience, but they have experience working at this. And so it's giving people something far better than a resume. It's showing like capabilities and capacities and willingness to learn and your drive, and showing how you're able to level up through the various forms of education to become a master of that craft. And then it gives us an entire pool of people that you can draw on that say, I need somebody who's a painter, and you can go and like same day labor ready, go and get somebody off the line to say, come over to this construction site and help to work to fulfill this. And eventually get to the point where individual people will be able to become independent contractors, which goes into the next type of initiative, which is called the Enterprise America. And essentially we want to get people to a position where they can be like independent contractors. They can set the terms and the conditions of the contract of their work, and less people becoming employees and more being independent contractors. so that they have a negotiating stance by which they can determine how much their wages are going to be, or what sort of benefits they're going to get from the company, what their work environment and schedule is going to be. And so you don't get trapped in the sense of an employer treating you like you're a possession that they own and you're just a warm body to fill a position they can use you however they want. You have a contract in terms of what type of work you're going to do, and it gives you a stance of negotiation to make sure that if environments are not conducive to your well-being, you have a way to call them out. Like, this doesn't befit the contract in terms of what I agreed to do, and so we need to either come to the negotiating table and, mediate our differences, or I can leave this position and move on to something else. And then knowing that that individual has, a steady ground in terms of the Mighty Great Care Package, where if they leave a position because it's not working out in terms of their contract, it's not like they're completely destitute. They have that support system. And in that case, that system can trigger in and say, this is, a extraneous circumstance. This was unforeseen, thing that happened. You lost your job all of a sudden. Instead of having unemployment insurance, we have assurances that somebody can alter their Mighty Great Care Package to help to support themselves through that time in which they're phasing into finding a new form of work. And so in this sense, it's able to help us to break down the current existing social safety nets and replace them with the Mighty Great Care Package. This helps us to solve for the fact that Social Security is an impossible puzzle that is never going to be successful. Even if you look at it now, it's not really successful, and there needs to be, an end point put to it, and people need to be grandfathered, into, that system if that's what they choose to, but also an option to be able to come to the Great Care Package where they get much more support than they could ever get with Social Security alone. And we want more people to be involved in accessing the Mighty Great Care Package because of the fact it's, when you have bulk, when you have more people that access it, and more people contributing to it, because accessing it requires a participation and contribution, then we are able to have more to be able to share amongst everyone. And then it's less something that we could look out and say, like, well, we can cut that off, and yeah, it's going to hurt a few people here, but, it's going to save somebody else over here. Instead, it's holistic. Everybody gets to benefit from this. And so we're not leaving anybody behind, and we're all contributing to enhancing whatever we can offer within that. And when we see people are struggling and maybe we need to add some more incentives here, we need to add some more outputs, and we need to improve our distribution, this is now a system that's a mechanization that we can alter and shift to make it, the arrangement of it, work based off of, the needs of now befit the times. And so it becomes something where if we do need to adjust a variable in one way or another, we can. But ultimately, the whole point of it is to uphold the integrity of it existing as the baseline standard of the criterion echelon of society living the good life. And so when we're able to bring people out of, the precarious situation of Social Security not being enough to be able to live in these modern times, and bringing them into a situation where, you're giving old age security, and maybe you can't work anymore and you choose to have in-home care because you're elderly and you need assistance. Like, the in-home care giving is part of one of the options that you can choose from in your Mighty Great Care Package. Also, again, like, if you wanted to live your life as a traveler, that's something you can access in terms of your choice of, how you want your benefits to be able to be distributed to you. And instead of having a cutoff time in terms of you can access your Social Security at age 65 or whatever they're trying to bump it up to now, we more look at it in terms of, we want to empower people to be lifelong learners. We also want to empower people to be lifelong workers. And not in a sense of you have to slave labor away for the rest of your life and then you get no time off. Rather, instead, like, we want people to participate and contribute every single day of their lives to the improvement and the betterment, because this is part of their legacy. It's their contribution to society. They are leaving, so much opportunity for generations to come to be able to build off of what we've built up together. And so society moves away from the sense of like everybody trying to retire early, and then you get bored doing something and you still find ways to contribute. Like, this puts us all on the hook to contribute together, so that nobody gets a sense of, anybody's getting away, and there's anybody sponging off of a system, or there's, we're paying out to the elderly and, ransoming our future to not be able to pay for, the things that we need ourselves, because we have to pay out to, the old people. Instead, we're all accumulating our resources together. And we're no longer looking at people as like somebody needs to sacrifice for the betterment of everybody else. It's like we're all improving together. And we would want for people to have a sense of like duty and responsibility and want for contributing and participating as long as they possibly can to that system. And then making sure that in order to access the Might of Great Care package, you have to participate and contribute, which comes into the next initiative, which is essentially I'm wanting to create a stewardship branch of the military, not the armed forces, the military. And the reason why is because wanting to make everybody become stewards and to have mandatory service for all people to give their talents in service to stewardship of the nation, to take on stewardship initiatives that are supported in supplementing the initiatives program where entrepreneurs in the Enterprise America are doing initiative work to get our programs and various projects that we come up with that are initiating our service to welfare and stewardship to up-level society. We come up with these programs and these projects, and we outsource them through the development through the Maker Smalls, or in outsourcing it to contract work through those who are enterprising. But then also having the stewardship branch, which is creating a baseline fundamental resource of people actively participating and contributing as a duty requirement. And so it's kind of similar to how we have people working for National Guard. It's a set amount of time that you have to contribute to doing some of the work that we have agreed upon together is what our welfare and stewardship initiatives are. And you have to put work in, every year there's a minimum requirement. And you do that because this is what's required of you as an American citizen or somebody in America. And by doing this, you are able to tap into the stewardship resources of the Might of Great Care package. It helps to add value into the Might of Great Care package. It helps us to achieve our welfare and stewardship goals and objectives. And then it also makes sure that everybody's participating, contributing on the same level. This is a way to establish a baseline standard of equality. And equality not in terms of outcomes, but equality in terms of everybody has to participate and contribute. Doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. It doesn't matter who your parents are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Everybody has to put in this time, effort, and energy in a certain standard amount in order to contribute to the enhancement and the development and the expansion of our resource commons. And we together as a collective choose what our welfare and stewardship initiatives and projects and programs are going to be. So we know exactly what they are, and this work is going to be done by those who have the capacity to do that work. So it's not, trying to take somebody who's unskilled in one area and put them to work to do that type of work. It's fine. It's matching the mastery with the actual service that needs to be done, and to putting people, in their best work to do their best work in service to us accomplishing the outcomes engineering the outcomes of our initiatives and our programs to be accomplished. And this is a way to make sure that everybody has work that they can do. They're always building experience and work. So they always have something that's building up on their resume, which makes them more appealing to as a prospect in terms of being hired by a company for, as an employee or as an independent contractor. And it's bypassing the level of, people not having enough experience. Oh, and it's bypassing the level of there are some people that just aren't considered hireable. This gives them more than enough qualifications, and at the very least, if they can't get a job as an employee somewhere, and they don't have the want to become an enterpriser and an entrepreneur, they still have work that they can do that is participating and contributing to society, and that earns their way to be able to access the Might of Great Care package. And so they're not getting left behind, but it's still expected to do something, in participation and contribution in such a way that, we determine that this is what is of value for us and what we need to get done. And so let's work on this together. And you're always finding the right person to fit that position. And if need be, educating people to level them up in the right skills so they can fill those types of needs, especially when we find there's a shortage in like one area or another, like especially in the vocational training, like for electricians and for, journeymen and these sorts of things. So the next thing goes into a sense of a lot of these initiatives for welfare and stewardship in projects, and the different programs are going to be based off of up-leveling our cities into what I like to call the City of Cities framework. Basically creating a template of adequate resources strategically placed within the right type of grid framing in every city to make sure that people are accommodated, steward, supported, provisioned, cared for, and cared about within the cityscape, to help to enhance the livability, habitability, beautification, security, and stability of our cities. To make sure that they are prepared to respond to natural disasters or emergency crisis and these sorts of things, to help to enhance the concept of like neighborhood watch and to make our cities more secure and to lessen the burden on our police departments and first responders and things like that, and to essentially make sure that cities have what is necessary in order for people to live well and thrive in them, access to latrine facilities and places to maintain hygiene, respite areas for people to sleep in, so that we don't have people living out on the streets, access to clean water, and a way for us to optimize our sanitation, to reduce our trash, and just to really enhance the quality of living within our cities and our towns, so that any person from any walk of life, from any place in America, can go into a city and understand there's going to be like a basic framework of resource that they could tap into and benefit from in these areas. And one of the biggest reasons why we want to have this framework is because we're going to lean in with America really enhancing one of the proper intended uses of our economy is to really make things very experiential, and we want to enhance travel within America and then international people coming here. And so our cities need to up-level their game in terms of their offerings and their appeal to people to come into these spaces. And if they know that there's a certain standard of resources and utilities and things like that that they can tap into and utilize and make use of in these areas, then it makes it more travel friendly. And so this is a way to be able to alleviate the houselessness problems that we have, the filth and grime that we see in cities. It helps to reduce, hooliganism and crimes and these sorts of things. And it helps us to, keep a good lookout for one another, and gives us a sense of like community pride, pride in place, and to start rethinking our cities. Like I think of it often when I think about this city of cities in terms of what type of outcomes I would want to see in terms of how people are involving with one another in our cities. Is, I want it to be conducive to how people in Japan walk through the cities, and you would never dare see a person there, throwing their rubbish on the side of the road. It's completely improper and highly, out of the norm if somebody does that. And to witness something like that, or even trash on the ground, is, appalling. And somebody steps in to pick it up, because it's like, these are our spaces and they must be respected. I want that type of sense to come to our cities and our towns in America, where we all have a sense of like civic duty to make sure that our spaces are kept clean and thriving and well maintained. And knowing that if we can just provision, accommodate, steward, and support and care for these environments so they're conducive to people being able to have experiences in these places that are good, and that it takes care of the people who are there, the people who are there will have a sense of, duty and obligation in, a civic manner to, take care of those spaces and to maintain the good quality that's there. And over time, because we will change those environments to be conducive to good health and well-being, it will change the behaviors of those people that go to those spaces. And we'll be, adopting a new type of, social and civic ideals, and we'll be able to emulate them and live them out and experience, and we'll have better outcomes within our cityscapes. So there's a lot of work to be done in order to build up the infrastructure to have these sorts of things. There's going to be a lot of maintenance work to get this done. And instead of, employing people with the government to work for the city to make these things work, it's much better to just contract this work out to independent entrepreneurs in, Enterprise America to do this work, and help to have stewards to do this work as well. And so you have a standard of, there will always be somebody that can step in to perform the tasks that are necessary in order for us to keep our spaces, conducive to well-being. Whether it's a matter of the people, involving their volunteer time as a steward, which is required for everybody, or it's people being, through entrepreneurship and being contracted to do that work. And in that case, we have to fund to be able to pay for those people to do that work, and that comes through our stewardship funding, which comes into the next initiative that I want to talk about in terms of taxation. We need to change our tax system. We really need to simplify it. We need to be able to put it in terms of like what actually makes sense of getting the things done that we need to get done. There are certain things that we have to like maintain a certain standard, basically paying for achieving the preamble promise. We need to, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty, and in order to do that, we have to set aside certain, tax amounts to be able to achieve that. But beyond that, we need to be able to have a capacity to fund our Might of Great Care package and to fund these stewardship programs in order to make sure we're creating this capacity for people to fare well in their lives. And we're stewarding our cities and our towns and our home spaces and whatnot. And so the funding for that comes in through a stewardship tax. It's a baseline standard tax. It's invariable. Everybody pays it. And it's kind of likened to a membership fee. You pay into it and you get out of it what is going to come from the Might of Great Care package. And then there's a portions tax. Essentially, it's a portion of your taxes that you have to pay, but you get to choose where it goes. Basically, here's a list of all of the initiatives we're working on this year or over the next 3 to 5 years. um, where do you want to see a portion of your taxes to go to fund that, so that we can max out the funding for that program and get it done sooner? Or, this is something that's really special and endearing to your heart, and it's something that you care about deeply and want to invest into that. You get to choose a portion of your taxes to go into there. This gives you a sense of agency and ownership and skin in the game, and you're able to help to push and drive progress in the ways that actually matter to you personally, but it's a part of our collective benefit. And this is how we fund the initiatives and the projects and the programs. It's through the capacity for people to take a portion of their taxes to direct those funds in that way. And yes, it is possible that you may be the person who could get contracted to do that work, but it's not in a sense of like you're paying in so that you know that you're going to get it back out. It's a matter of anybody is available to be able to access this type of work. It needs to get done. So if you want to invest your tax into a program, it's like, I can do that work for that particular project. I want to see that project get accomplished. I'm going to invest my money in that direction. It's kind of like a vote of confidence. That's what we should be working on. And then you could bid to contract to be able to get the job to do that. And it would be possible. And it's not corrupt because, you're not the one who's making the choice in terms of, whether you get to do the work or not, but you are choosing, if there's to be work to be done, if we're going to take the initiative somewhere, we're going to accomplish something first and make it priority. I want it to be about this. And you get to, essentially vote your conscience with your taxes. And then the other third part of the taxation is called an equilibrium tax, which essentially helps us to kind of like get a grip in terms of the massive income inequality that we have in society right now. It's not necessarily so much about the income inequality, but more in terms of like there is this very small portion of the population that has most of the capital and assets, and a lot of what they have gotten in terms of that capital assets is off of speculative, essentially gambling. It's vapor where there's nothing there. It's like a sense that this has value, but it doesn't really actually have any ties to practical production. And so the people who are doing the labor work where they're actually making the practical production of things are only getting paid, hourly wages, and that's not even enough to, be able to pay their way of life, to pay for rent and food and, utilities and all of these things. And so, and because there's no way for them to get ahead in the, high cost of living and the low amount of their pay, they have no capacity to be able to tap into purchasing, to build property ownership and assets and to gain capital and whatnot. And so the people with, speculative shares growing their income, they use this money that's tied to basically nothing to be able to buy up all of the tangible things. And so that's the biggest part of the inequality, scenario that we look at in terms of the capacity for, people with the money to retain all of the things of value and prevent people from ever up leveling to be able to own property and to be able to grow wealth in society. And so the equilibrium tax essentially helps us to put a tangible means, a mechanization to correct for this corruption. It's not to try to say that, people who have accumulated all the assets and resources and capital and money, are wholly bad people and they must be punished or anything like that. But it's rather saying that in order for society to function optimally, in order for us to achieve our ultimate goal of America works for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind and everybody lives the good life, we need to have that criterion baseline standard. And so essentially what this equilibrium is about is distinguishing an upper boundary limit of the elite echelon of society, the upper echelon of society. There's a boundary limit, and that boundary limit is connected directly to the lower boundary limit of the criterion echelon of society. And these two are in lock with one another. So if people want to extend, their wealth and increase and expand, what is accumulated in their capacities in their life, they have to have some sort of covering the back end to help to make sure that as they go, we grow with them. And it's not to maintain a solid stance of like we're never going to grow or become more expansive. We want to become more expansive, but that boundary limit has to stay within an equilibrium base. If you don't want it to be asymmetrical, because then you're not having a solid standard of balance, which we could align within a system of balance, checks, balances. We'd be able to establish the means to know what is just, what is fair, what is reasonable, what is right. We can create systems of orientation to be able to justify what we're doing and how things are being, distributed in society, especially in terms of the Might of Great Care package. So the equilibrium tax is essentially to say, whoa, slow your horses, you're getting a little, out of hand here, because people back here are not able to catch up and they're getting left behind. And so we need to shore up the back end to help them to be reinforced so that you're not leaving them behind. They're coming with us, but we're expanding our capacity to grow out together. And so when I look at this model in my head is essentially there's multiple spheres that are, going out from the center and then coming out. The criterion echelon is towards the center of it. And it's essentially saying that is the core element of like what we're working towards. That's the point of the exercise. The whole point is to expand and enhance the criterion echelon. And then to, from there, grow out opportunities of prospects for people to level up their lives as high as they want to go. But there has to be an upper boundary limit to say that things cannot go so far out of excess, because this is a finite planet. There's limits to our capacities and resources. And if everything that we have gets spent out here to the very few people that reach the upper boundaries, there is never going to be enough to be able to sustain the people, the core, the majority of the people in the criterion echelon. This will begin to dwindle and to decline. And this is the basis by which the structure of every other level of society is wholly dependent upon. Without us, there is no you. And so it's understanding that we have to work together to establish, the boundary by which the people in the criterion echelon have to be up-leveled and supported and reinforced so that the integrity of the core point of the exercise, why we're here to maintain this and steward this criterion echelon, has to be secure in the capacity for us to grow. So if what you're going to do is going to be too far in excess and it's going to take away from this core, then you're not allowed to go that far. And so the equilibrium tax is about bringing you back down into the safe operating space of the capacity of understanding that not just our planet is finite in terms of resources, but the United States of America is finite in our resources. There's only so much here. We are a very rich and abundant nation, but there's limits to everything. And we need to understand, we need to have accounting for the things that we have here and understand, like, we're not trying to divvy everything up individually and make it exact proportion and everybody gets the same thing. I'm not okay with the concept of like rationing our resources in that way unless things are in a dire circumstances and there is no other way for us to be able to work a system in terms of expansive growth. But we want to get to a point where we are in comfortable conservation of what we do have. And that means we have to have that upper boundary limit. And so the equilibrium tax is just a matter of saying what you have up here has reached the upper limit. You have gone beyond the point in terms which we say you're deviating from the plan. And so you're taxed at a rate in which your taxes go in to help to fund those capacities for enhancing the Might of Great Care package, enhancing our stewardship initiatives and projects to grow out the criterion, echelons, so that it can become more expansive, so that you can continue to level yourself up. It's just making sure, the people in the outer echelons of society are looking out. They're trying to be pioneers and grow our human experience and take us to new heights. Okay, great. But you're so focused on that, you're not looking back, and you're not paying attention to everybody else. And, maybe you're too busy to care, but that's why we have government and that's why we have taxation, is because, we don't need you to care. We just need you to be a part of this in mutual agreement that we're all in this together. And you have to make sure that you're doing your part in sustaining all of this. And as you grow, we have to grow with you, because if we don't grow with you, you ain't going very far. The system will eventually break down because you're lacking integrity, because you're forgetting where you came from. You're forgetting the core concept of why we're here and what we're working on together. This is why it's very important for us to have a common shared interest of our sense of this is the American identity. We are stewards. We are welfaring stewards, and we are stewarding a criterion echelon of society to make sure everybody lives a good life. And we're doing that by a means and a modes and a method that makes sure nobody gets left behind or kept behind. And everybody is able to, do this without ecological offense. And we're able to do it in the shortest time possible, because we don't want this to, drag out and take forever. Like in 10 years, we're going to get somewhere where we might want to go. No, we need to work on the here and the now, enhance our experiences on the daily, so that tomorrow we can reap the benefits and build on all the good hard work we've done from the day before. And we need to be able to do it together. So the equilibrium tax essentially says, you may not be thinking of everyone and everything, but we as a society are. And we're just keeping that check and balance to make sure there's, nothing gets too far out of hand. But we're doing so in such a way where we're trying to make it to empower the whole of society, so that we advance together with integrity. What's the saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And that's what we're trying to do, is like, we don't want one person to be able to go to the moon and then we never go back again, because it's like we did all this hard push for one person to be able to have the experience when everybody else would have liked to have that experience too. And so having the stewardship tax, the portions tax, and the equilibrium tax helps us to make sure that we're able to maintain, sustain, grow, and comfortably conserve our resources in a way that is distributive, not in a sense of a hand up, hand out, or impossible capitalistic chance at a big break. It's opportunity of a fair shake. And basically, paying it forward to ourselves and to the future, this capacity for us to, sustain a way of being that is conducive to our well-being. And so having the, stewardship branch of the military is super important, especially in terms of thinking of veterans. And when people leave military service, sometimes they kind of lose their way, because it's such a structured, ordered regimen. You're a part of this group, and your entire life is wholly insulated in this world of the military. And excuse me, and to leave that, it's hard for some people to reintegrate back into society, and there is no true standard of reintegration back into society. And so the stewardship branch of the military is a way to establish that reintegration process, so that you're not like, okay, your time's up in the military, bye, have a nice day, good luck reintegrating back into society. It's like a way that you can go into something where it's still giving in service, it's still structured, it's still ordered, it's organized. There's things to apply yourself to, but the difference being you're not in the armed forces. You're not going out and being a part of the military. The other great thing about this program is that when we have, a national crisis, or, a natural disaster, or, an emergency of some sort, we have a whole entire embodiment of every single person in America can be mobilized. And the biggest concern I have about this is I want to make sure that it's, in order to mobilize the stewards, it has to be something that we collectively opt in to do. That's where it would deviate in terms of, or differentiate in terms of, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This is one branch in which they are not able to direct and deploy people. The people themselves are the ones that choose that we need to deploy under these certain terms and conditions and circumstances. And so the people themselves are the ones that opt into that. I'm seeing it more along the lines of Congress being the ones who can initiate for us to be able to go into, emergency mode, to be able to deploy stewards to be responsive in times of need. But it would make it so that, people are not incapable of being responsive. It makes us ready for anything. And that readiness and that response and that capability to, be deployed and to be of service, I think that that's something that everybody in America should know in their mind and their heart, that at any point in time they could be called to serve. And that, there's no getting out of it. That everybody has to do their part to make this work. And just even knowing you have that sense of responsibility and duty is a sense of pride and prestige that you can have for your life. Knowing that the nation depends on you. It's something that people in the military, in the armed forces, experience all of the time. Pride and service. And to be able to extend that sense of honor, duty, and sacrifice, not in a sense of sacrificing your life, but sacrificing, your normal way of life, and putting that on hold for a time so you can be responsive to the needs of others, so that we can, return to this, stasis of, everything is getting along well, optimally, idealistically in America, despite some sort of setback. Imagine having a stewardship branch of the military in which all people are a part of that, and we can deploy people in times of something like COVID, so that we can get people to be, essential workers and frontline workers to, make sure that our distributive chains and our resource chains are not cut off, and that people aren't being left behind or not able to have the resources that they need. Everybody can mobilize to do their part to make sure everything works. It's not going to work exactly like it is, it's going to be a reduced sort of thing. But when you have people enabled and empowered, instead of, people freaking out thinking there's nothing they can do, or, questioning, what's going on, it gives them something to do. And when in the middle of a crisis, if you have something to do, it puts your mind at ease. It makes sure people are focused on something. It gives them a sense of hope and encouragement and inspiration. It brings us together. This is very much what happened during COVID. Now imagine doing that under the terms of everybody's deployed as a steward. All right, everybody, game on. Shit's hit the fan, excuse the language. Time to pull up, step up, do your part. And then everybody's they show up. Okay, what's my duty? What's my assignment? What do I got to do? Let's get this done. And we do what's necessary to get things done. And if we have, the Maker's Malls that's training people to do stuff, within the system, you can train people to know the basics of first aid and, understand like how to keep spaces clean and how to build, outside structures. And these are all things that we needed to do and deploy and mobilize. But we had, lack of resource, ill-equipped. There weren't enough people trained to do these sorts of things. Stewardship branch helps us to level up, to achieve that level of readiness. So no matter what happens, we're prepared people, It makes me think very much in terms of, I could imagine how much better Ukraine would be faring in this, invasion that has been happening for years now. Russia came in and attacked Ukraine and put them under siege. And I think of them often. I think of them every day. The amazing power of resilience. These people have found ways to make it work and be okay. But I can't help but think all of the time of like, if only those people were prepared in advance to hunker down and do the hard work, able to mobilize and know what to do, where to be, and how to best serve, how to, create the right types of resource change so you can shore up your weaknesses and help to insulate things and keep yourself safe and protected. How many lives could have been saved in that circumstance had they been that readied as a people? And then I think of America, like if America goes to, a full out war, not just America going somewhere else and warring on other people, but we're in an actual full on war. There are so many people in America that are ill prepared to even live in the experience of we're a nation at war. I learned so much from my great-grandparents, who lived through World War II. And I learned from my grandfather what it takes to be a soldier serving in the military during World War II and giving everything you have to your country. And learned from my grandma what it takes to be able to secure the home space back home and to be able to help to participate and contribute to society being able to still function despite we had so many of our people that had to be deployed and were gone. And so it was this entire call to service of everybody, and the way that they lived and how they, went into, conservation mode, and how they set to work and they learned new skills, and women went and did jobs that the men used to fulfill because we had to fulfill those roles. Like everybody stepped up. And that entire generation was just so completely amazing. How they came together to make it work was just profoundly amazing. Things were a whole lot less complicated back then in terms of where we are right now. I don't think if, we actually got brought into a full wage of war that America would be able to sustain itself internally with that sort of situation. I mean, look at Iran right now, like how those people are able to endure being under siege. I think of Russia when they were warred on, like the only reason why they sustained was because those people are able to sustain, they're even willing to burn down their own cities in order to fortify themselves and insularly protect themselves from invasion, and that's how they win wars. It's like, where is that level of fortitude in Americans? I don't see that capacity. And I'm not saying I want everybody to be hardened military, able to go out and pick up a gun and defend the nation sort of thing. But we need to be able to have people that are ready to mobilize to take care of business when called to serve, to do the good, hard, necessary work to secure the American situation. Regardless of external factors that are beyond our control, we have to be able to take care of our home and take care of ourselves. And that means we need all hands on deck. We need everybody involved. We need everybody participating, contributing to it. And we are not prepared for that as a nation. And I see creating a stewardship branch of the government and creating a mandatory service for all people to be a steward and participate and contribute. Every single year you have to participate in this is a great way to help people to be prepared to answer the call and heed that call whenever they're called to serve. And in the meantime, also build and up level their talents and their skills and give it in service to others in such a way that is building up our resource space of our resource commons, so that though there are limits to what America has, we are an abundant nation. And if we can steward our resources and comfortably conserve them in the right capacity and start living out life experiences and an ontology, a way of life, and life ways that are conducive to our capacity to maintain the good life for all people, America will be able to be prepared to face whatever may come. And so the next sense of initiatives that I really want to bring about is one of my favorite ones, which is called the Homestead Act, reimagining the Homestead Act. Essentially, the Homestead Act, when it was first initiated, it was like, if you can go and you can find a land of, some land, and you can cultivate that land and make it productive, for a certain amount of time, and you can, basically lift yourself up by your own bootstraps on this land, it becomes yours. And the act essentially said, like, this becomes your home, if you can make it productive. Something similar to that in terms of reimagine it for modern times. Basically, we need to make sure everybody in America has a secure home space. Everyone. Houselessness is not something that we can endure in our society anymore. It is literally holding us back from achieving, any level of greatness, and is actually like a dark blemish on our society's prestige. And it's unnecessary, and it's not conducive to well-being, and it's a violation of human rights, and it is a degrading the value of human life. So we need to respect and appreciate and value all human life, and the best way to do that is to make sure everybody has a safe, secure home space. And that is very well possible in America. If we re-envision the Homestead Act to make it so that we have an actual legitimate step-by-step level-up process for people to become homeowners if they choose. Not everybody wants to become a homeowner. But there needs to be a actual legitimate leveling up process by which people can become homeowners, because right now, so many people are shut off from it. It's impossible because all of the people that have accumulated all the assets and resource have priced everybody out of being able to have a home to own. And the rules and regulations and red tape and permitting process and all these things and the limits on our capacities for resource and the available contractors to do the work for building stifles our capacity to be able to build more housing stock. And so the Homestead Act reimagines that in terms of creating a standard pace by which we build a certain amount of houses every term. And those houses are strategically placed in different areas. And we essentially invite anybody who's interested in it into the program of becoming a real estate co-op owner. For people who don't want to become homeowners, there's real estate co-op rental programs in terms of like you own a stake in the game in terms of the rental that you reside in. And this makes sure that you have it's kind of like having stock in a company where you're able to make a vote and, have your voice heard and whatnot. And to be able to help to make changes in something. It's a way to make sure that people aren't exploited in their housing spaces. But in terms of home ownership, helping people move up from owning real estate kind of like in a portion in a cooperative, and then eventually level up to becoming, caretakers of property, and then they become first homeowners, and essentially you're maintaining a home space and helping to up level the value of those homes, and then passing it on to others within the realm of the cooperative that are constantly filling in new people that need to up level into the next stage of home ownership, and eventually get to the point where as you up level, it's kind of like, I know it sounds kind of silly to think of it this way, but that's where my mind goes with it, is like hermit crabs. Adorable little creatures. They, when they grow inside of their shell, they find a shell that fits them, and then when they grow too big for it, they leave that shell behind and they go find a new one that's bigger and fit them as they grow. And then they leave the other shell behind, and some other hermit crab comes up and then can take over that shell. And so it's like, it's never vacant, for very long, as long as there's more hermit crabs around. But you up level to the home space that is conducive to the lifestyle that you're choosing to live, where you want to live, how big of a house you want, if you're growing your family, these sorts of things. But as you go along, you become responsible for stewarding and maintaining and caring for and managing that space, and helping to, make sure that it is up leveling in terms of investing in making the space as efficient as possible, making sure that, it doesn't fall into disrepair, these sorts of things. And so every time you leave a space behind, it is better than it's left better than what you had found it. And up leveling people into it to eventually enough people pass through a house as a cooperative owner, and up leveling it, for the time period that they live there, let's say it's a year, eventually that house will have increased in value so much then it can then turn around and be sold to somebody who is at the higher level of the co-op, where they're actually becoming a purchaser. And then that home then becomes on the market for them to purchase, and then the funds that are earned from the difference between the initial value of the home that's maintained throughout the process of the development to the point when it's actually sold, that money goes into the investment fund for us to be able to build more housing. There are plenty of houses that are sitting that are vacant right now, many of them that are owned by people that are foreigners that don't live here. These sorts of things change because vacant houses are not possible anymore, and foreign property owners now have a prohibitive tax based on their real estate portfolio, in terms of trying to limit the amount of foreign ownership of American housing stock, and to make it so that there's more available for Americans, so that foreign interests can't buy the real estate and turn it into, rentals, and Americans themselves are not able to access that home as a homeowner, which is what they would probably prefer than to be a renter. So there's various programs like that, up leveling, finding best practices in terms of new types of building materials that we can use, and new types of dwelling unit sizes, different orientations, new innovations to help to improve the efficiency of systems within a house, so that when they're built out, they can be built with the future in mind, in terms of where we don't have to build houses the same exact way that we've been building them for hundreds of years. We can become innovative with it in terms of the utilities and whatnot that are inside home spaces. And the whole idea is that if you're a part of this program, the Homestead Act, that's your job, is to find a way to create housing that is safe and secure and optimal and efficient, a way to find means to remodel and repair existing home stock that we have and get it up to, a standard level of positive habitability. Being able to get the process of developing and building houses down to such a refined art that we can build them much faster, and helping people in terms of, especially individuals who have been displaced because of natural disasters destroying their homes, a way for them to be able to step into a housing program that helps them to level themselves back up into getting into their home spaces. I think very often about Hurricane Katrina in terms of there's still people today, to this day, who are impacted by that storm, who have not been able to be made whole in terms of their housing situation. And so if those type of people were able to enter in the Homestead Act, they would be able to have a process by which they can, still live in a house and still be investing like it was home ownership for them. And as they pay rent, it's a form of mortgage that they're paying. It's like a lease to own sort of thing, but the value they invest in that moves along with them as they grow into a new housing. And in this way, especially for people that want to still stay in their communities, they just want to rebuild their houses, they would be able to up-level themselves back into their own house, as it's going to take time for the insurance to process the claims for them to get back into their space. And then they can build it back better, which is, another part of the Homestead Act is being able to alter the way that we create insurance for homes in terms of assurance, essentially making sure that if anything happens to your home you're going to get a new home. We're assuring that you're going to be able to have a home space. You're not going to be left homeless, in the aftermath of something. There's always something for you to fall back onto. And then you may not be able to build back 100% exactly the way it was before. Sometimes we have the capacity, and that's what we should strive for, to build back better. And then the sense of people becoming responsible for the caretaking of existing properties and up-leveling them, and to have an entire portion of our housing stock taken off of the commodification market and put specifically into the Homestead Act in terms of these are houses that we transact within this, group, this cooperative, where people are up-leveling through the houses, building it, increasing, enhancing the value of the house as they go, to the point where then it can re-enter the commodification market. In the meantime, people have been growing tangible wealth in terms of, what they put in mortgage, is a portion of that is going towards them being able to carry that value forward to be able to have in home ownership. It's not a tremendous amount, but it's enough to make sure that it's paying back over time. And then as they up-level the houses, especially, what homeowners love to do. I've owned homes before, and my favorite thing to do is to remodel it and add value to it. So it gives people a sense of the do-it-yourself, adding value. And if you want to up-level your skills to learn how to do it, you can go to the Maker's Mall and learn how to do some carpentry or whatever, the case may be in terms of talents or skills, and you can build those houses, increase that value stock. When we found a house in a community that's in disrepair and just needs a little bit more tender love, care, and attention, and some investment in the resources, we can bring it into the co-op, take it off the commodification market, bring it into the co-op, and help to process people into these houses so that they can help to up-level it, get it back up to par, and then pass it along to another family that then comes in, lives in it for a time, helps to repair it, and then moves on from there. And in this way, we're able to actionably put ourselves in the process of making sure that our entire housing stock gets put back up on the level. It's, these are safe dwelling spaces for everybody, and making sure that the people who are living in them know how to take care of the homes and are obligated to do so, or are incentivized to do so because of what they'll be able to get return on investment for it. It also helps people who, are on the brink of bankruptcy or repossession of their homes or something to that effect, can opt for their houses to be entered into this co-op program so they don't lose the entire value of their home. They still have to move out of the home eventually, but it would be a way for them to stay in it for a little bit longer. It's brought into the market, and then they are moved into another housing situation that is more conducive to their affordability at that time. And then that house then becomes a part of the standard stock that we share amongst the cooperative. And then that house gets repaired and improved over time, and it still is able to live in and dwell, and it doesn't just go back to the bank and then sits there because somebody may or may not have the capacity to buy it. And then what's going to happen? An investor comes in and buys and turns it into a rental, and then all of a sudden there's another house off the market in which people are priced out of and they're not going to be able to become homeowners. We're putting a stop to that intentionally through the process of integrating people into houses, up-leveling our existing housing stock, repairing it, bringing it back up to level, and then building more along the way in terms of up-leveling the environments. This also removes the factor of the NIMBYism in terms of people saying they don't want to have, affordable housing built into, their neighborhoods and whatnot. It's actually creating a tax incentive base for people who allow for these types of housing communities to grow with more affordable housing in their areas. The tax incentive base for people to be more receptive to accepting these in that environment, while it may in some capacity, in their opinion, bring down the value of their home, because these houses are a part of the co-op instead of commodification, it actually doesn't affect the pricing of houses in their area. And to incentivize it, houses that accept these homes into it while they're still, in the co-op portfolio, local houses around it get a discount on their taxes, so that, or a credit on their taxes, so that they end up paying less. And it's a way to even out and compensate for the fact that your house still maintains value, and we're up leveling these houses that are in here to get up to your level. And so we're not dragging you down, we're just trying to lift everybody up. And the housing that's in that area that is considered affordable is affordable because it's through the co-op that people are up leveling to be able to purchase. And so we're able to keep the cost of living in these homes down, but don't necessarily have to build a home that is not worth as much. The whole point is to optimize the value of the home so that once it gets to enough iterations of people living through it, and it's to the point where it's able to transition back into commodification, it is at the level of all the houses around, and it actually up levels the value of the houses that are in that community. So, while these people already have, 30-year mortgages and they're living in their house in 20 years time, this house comes back onto the market in terms of commodification, and it is at an increased level than it was before, now increases the value of their house, and they have gotten a gain on the value of their property because they allowed this one to come in and up level over time. So we have these types of incentives that we can bring in that helps to, block out the NIMBYism that we have. The other big thing is in terms of there's a lot of people that don't want certain individuals to be in their community. This is a way to help to kind of break down those barriers in terms of the people that would be coming into these homes are going to be, varied and diverse, but you're looking at them in terms of these are your cooperative neighbors that are coming here to enhance this place, because part of their responsibility being a part of the Homestead Act is to improve the house and improve the neighborhood. And so they're coming in with the intention in set that they're coming there to do good and be good and to be a good neighbor, because that's part of the requirement for this whole program to be able to work. It's you have to be able to contribute to the enhancement and improvement of these spaces that you are inhabiting, which includes the neighborhoods that you're in. And so it helps to break down the barriers in terms of the people who are coming into these spaces already coming with the mindset that they belong. and that you belong to, and we're building community and neighborhood together. And so a lot of that type of, you know, bigotry in terms of like resisting certain types of people in certain areas, a lot of that's going to be able to break down, because you can start to look at people in terms of being cooperative partners in the enhancement of your neighborhood. And you should want for these type of people to come in, because knowing that they're a part of the Homestead Act, these people have committed themselves to a whole entire process of living out as stewards of these types of homes and your neighborhoods. They bring value. They may not look like you, talk like you, think like you, act like you, walk like you, but they're bringing an enhanced value to your neighborhood. And so it helps to break some of that down a little bit, and then it helps to foster a sense of like, we don't have to be so rigid in our thinking and beliefs that, the people that live around you have to be exactly like you, sort of thing. And the great thing about it is, like, if there really is a conflict or there is something wrong with people, that are living in these neighborhoods and it's just not clicking or something like that, it is not this overwhelming, difficult thing, for people to choose to move on and for new, residents to be able to come in, and those people can move on to a different house. And so it's much better than the situation of, buying a home and then finding out you absolutely hate your neighbor. And, what are you going to do? You bought this house and, you can't just turn around and sell it. And this gives you a capacity to get in and out of a home with much more ease. And it's great because you can actually move through the spaces and then be able to find a community that, like, I really love this house. I absolutely love this community. The roots that I have established in this neighborhood, this feels like home. This feels like where I belong. And so you can opt in to be able to buy out the contract for that home being a part of the Homestead Act and just purchase it, where it stands in terms of the level. But you have to be a part of the Homestead Act in order to get to that point. And there should be, a certain barrier process. Like, you have to have been in the program for so long, you have to live in this space for so long, you have to show that you have accumulated ties in order to justify it, but there should be a way to be able to break out of that system and return it back in, and then you buy it. So it's not really turning it back into the commodification market, it's just saying, like, the whole point of the Homestead Act is for you to be able to find your forever home. And if you find it along the way, like, good, we want you to stay, And then you would still have a requirement to be able to fulfill, part of your obligations of the Homestead Act. And you would be able to do that in service of going and volunteering and working to help to build out or repair or improve other spaces over time. And that would be part of your obligation contract to be able to, buy out that contract and be able to make that your forever home. There's so much opportunity to be able to build this out. And the whole point is to make sure that we can get people into homes. And that process of integration through, being a part of the act and the program, over time you're accumulating the value so that when you choose to transfer into your forever home, all the value that you have accumulated over time comes with you, and that's your down payment. That's how you pay for all of the processing fees for getting into your new home. All of that goes with you, and if you choose to leave, the entire Homestead Act and you haven't found a house within that system that you want to, move into, and you want to find some other house somewhere else, you would have an entire pooling of resources that you would be able to take out and invest into another house. And there would be able to be incentives for that where you don't get like a taxation for taking out that value if it's moving into a home or something like that. But if you chose that you wanted to just take that value out, you can take it out in a different form. It would be, of course, taxed, but you would be able to use it for some other resource. So let's say, your dream was to become a homeowner, but you decided along the way, through the Homestead Act, maybe I don't want to be a homeowner. This is a lot of work, You just decide to go through the process and then cash out at the end of your contract, and then just take what you have to be able to go and invest in something else, And so this is a way to build tangible wealth. And it's one of the number one things that people say why they want to become a homeowner is to be able to build tangible wealth and generational wealth. But so many people are priced out of it, and there's not enough housing access and these sorts of things. So many people that are unable to even rent a house because, you know, the requirements are so rigid and so confining, and you got to have credit, but it's mostly about debt, and it's just ridiculous. But if you instead turn it into a sense of like, you know, this is a cooperative and you're signing on a contract and these are the obligations for you to involve in this, and so you have a stake in the game sort of thing, then people will be able to, no matter what, be able to have access. It may be a little bit more cost prohibitive, or you may be required to take on some, you know, probationary type of measures to make sure, like, to respond for, like, maybe you weren't a great tenant before, that makes it so people don't want to rent to you now. Like, you can take on certain incentives in terms of, like, I'm going to do these things in order to, you know, make up for that or whatnot, and get to the point where people can move from a renter's co-op into a home ownership co-op if that's what they choose to do. And over time, they can build up tangible capacities for that. And for us to have a means to build that up in society, this is necessary because we don't have a pathway to home ownership clearly distinguished in society. It's just like a, you know, mad grab it all, and it's whoever has the most money is the one that, you know, gets out on top sort of thing. In the meantime, we have so many people that are houseless. We have so many people that, you know, want to be able to own a home and are unable to. We have so many people that aren't able to rent because the rental standards are just ridiculous. And so, you know, this entire situation is frustrating, and the fact that so many people are put in this precarious situation, and this creates instability in their life, insecurity in their life, and this affects every other aspect of their life. Their health and their well-being declines because of this. So the Homestead Act is really about making sure we're shoring up that security of provisioning the number one thing that all people need is a safe home space. Because from a safe home space, people are able to develop themselves out to become their best version, you know? And so this is crucial and important, especially if we want to have a, you know, domestic order in a civil society. We need to make sure that everybody has a safe home space. Otherwise, we can't very well expect people to, you know, be on their best behavior or do their best or be their best if they don't have a safe home space from which they can build out that sensibility of who they are, develop their character, and really have a you know, a home base by which they can touch base on and work on themselves so that when they enter the world that they can do good and be good. Moving on from there, another one of my favorite initiatives is the Golden Door of Opportunity and the immigration treks. Essentially, it's recognizing our immigration system is wholly broken, and it is not conducive to human rights or respecting the dignity of life, and it's really violating this sense of the value of the human being, and it creates this massive otherisms, and it harms the human spirit, not just the people who are getting, you know, treated poorly because they're immigrants, but also Americans here having to see ourselves try to cast society and to discount other people because of, you know, nation of origin. And I think that really perverts and distorts our sensibilities in our minds, and because of that, society is hurt overall. So one of the ideas about the immigration trek essentially is to give a pathway by which people can enter in America, be able to stay if they choose, and to be able to become citizens, or they can eventually get to the point where they have the capacity to return back to their homes. There are different ways for people who want to come into America can level up their lives. They can assume the asylum trek. They can assume the citizen trek, the dreamers and doers trek, and then the return immigration trek, which is where they would be able to go back home after up-leveling themselves and their skills here in America and building some tangibilities in terms of resources that they could eventually take back home to help to make that a safe space for themselves. The whole idea is to really bring back the value of America's immigration to be really the prestige and pride of our nation again, to make sure that there's no reason to invest billions of dollars or any money at all at like villainizing or criminalizing or demonizing other human beings. Rather, we build the process by which these people can integrate into society, become active participants and contributors, and make sure that they are pulling their weight, but they're also adding value to society, so that we can look at them as this like intrinsic, fundamental part of the American experience, and we need them and we appreciate them and we value them. Essentially, they are already here doing good work, and adding value to society, but we don't have it translate over in terms of us respecting, valuing, and appreciating that. So this is a way to really like make tangible metrics by which we can value them, knowing that people are coming in through certain trek processes, and that the only way you can legitimately come into America is if you're along one of these treks and processes. And because that process is so well known and established in society, like we understand if you're an immigrant, you're here, you have a purpose, you have a place, you have a meaning, you have participation and contribution, you're value adding to these sorts of things, and that anybody that causes trouble, there's a corrective mechanism in order to make sure that these people, are held accountable to these sorts of things, and it's a zero tolerance type of policy. If you mess up your contracted privilege to be here, we have a reasonable way to respond in terms of, being here. If you have to live up to that standard of, good citizenship and being a good guest. And if you don't, then we have ways to out-process you. And this is a way to make sure that, a couple bad apples in the bunch doesn't spoil the whole bunch. The few people that may come in as immigrants that do wrong, the wrong thing, it doesn't make us wholly turn on every single immigrant. We understand the value of them, the value of their lives. They're here to participate and contribute. We need them. We want them. We need to have as many hands on deck as possible in order for us to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish as stewards. We're going to need as many people here as possible working towards accomplishing these initiatives. It's very much likened to how we had, immigrants were the ones who built our railroads and our roadway systems. We depended on them. Without them, it would not have happened. Granted, the way we valued them was not so great either, but we're taking on a sense of this is our pride and our prestige, and we're respecting and valuing all life, and immigration is a part of that sense that America is being stewards of humanity and civilization as well. And so we need to treat one another with the respect of valuing all lives. Moving on, because I'm running out of time here in terms of my ability to make more of this video, I wanted to add a couple more short talks about some of the other initiatives. Another one of my favorites is called PEACED. It's PEACED. It's a President's Everything Assistant Coordinating Executive Discretion or Discernment. Essentially, it's a personal AI assistant for the president. It moves through every single president. It's kind of like the Oval Office, in Air Force One and these sorts of things. It's part of the presidency itself, and it stays as a continuum factor for all presidents to be able to utilize and benefit, and it's a way to help them to be able to have a direct line of communication to American citizens, and American citizens can have communication with the president, so you're always on top of the situation. You understand the wants and the needs of the people. It's a way to help to coordinate and facilitate how policies are going to be initiated and written out. It's a way to be able to connect coordination between various different branches of the government, and a way to help to create a sense of continuity and a reflective capacity to archive what one president did in a certain situation, so another future president can look back and say, this is how they did it. And essentially having an artificial intelligence that becomes the full-on embodiment of every single president and bringing out the best of every single president in every circumstance and situation, so that we understand what is considered the best practices for being leader of the free world. Moving on from that, there's of course more, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to continue on to the next concept, which is the concept of creating another amendment to the Constitution to be able to establish a fourth branch of government called civics. Essentially, it makes the American people themselves a part of the government, a fourth branch to be able to create an anti-corruption mechanism, a corrective mechanism, and a way to be able to be more responsive. The nation will actually be, working towards the will of the people. It builds on the 9th and 10th Amendment, talking about the ultimate power rests with the people. And it makes it so that the people work directly with representational government, both the executive and with the legislative, to be able to create a sense of all the branches are working together cohesively to be able to determine the form and the fate and the pursuit of our perfection of our union over time. Like, these are the things that we want to do. Civics works directly with the legislators in order to determine the, civic duties for the stewardship branch of the military and what sort of stewardship initiatives are going to be brought forth in terms of, like, this is what we're going to invest in for this time period. And then the next part of that is creating another insulary protection for people. We have the federal level, we have the state level, we have the local level, when we need to add another insulary level, and that is for personal dominion. It's essentially giving a protection for the people from the government so it doesn't come in and impose its will upon the people. It prevents the government from coming in and telling people what to do, what to think, what to feel. It actually gives people the empowerment of the insulary protection to be able to pursue their own version of happiness, to have their life and to have liberty, and to have a basis by which they are protected from the government, coming in and dictating to them what their way of life can be. It gives them a firm basis by which they can argue their finer points of, why they have the rights and what their responsibilities are, and they get to ultimately hold the power of self-determination. And this is a way that we can have a sense of being self-sovereign, to be able to better respect the sovereignty of our localities, the sovereignty of our states, the sovereignty of our federal level. This sense that we are legitimizing our own sovereignty and we're leaning into personal independent self-governance helps us to really more solidify, not making rigid, it's still malleable and flexible, but solidify in terms of like the boundary limits of where each layer of the government is able to come in and be able to make a determination in order to solve for the intractability of the problems in society. And so the ultimate, power rests with the people in their personal dominion, in their personal space. Then they move out in terms of working with their localities, and every branch that you go out is more and more into the civics branch of government. The individual moving out becomes more and more a part of the civics branch, reaching through every different level of government to the point where it eventually reaches the federal level. And at that point, that's a societal wide change that we're making together. But it didn't go from the top down enforcement onto people, but it's the people themselves saying, this change is vital, this change is necessary, this is what we're doing, we're changing the way that we do this thing called life. We're changing the American situation because we recognize at the fundamental level, the individual personal level, that things cannot continue on the way they are. They must change. And then we group together and we say, yes, I agree, this needs to change. And then we formalize levels at the local level, yes, this needs to change. And we move out and out into the point where at the federal level, we're like, yes, this needs to change. And then the federal federal level initializes the capacity for the transition of some form of change, and they bring that empowerment down to the smallest concentration unit of empowering the individual and the localities. And by doing this, we're able to affect change most conducive to human well-being. It's most natural. People follow rules that are most natural, and it's most natural if they themselves are the ones who are a part of the process of making the determination of what changes were going to happen. And it gives people a sense of that agency that we need. And so this entire process, I'm running out of time, so I gotta cut it short, but the entire process essentially is talking about giving agency, capital, and resource to everybody. We're provisioning, accommodating, stewarding, supporting, caring for, and caring about everyone. We're making sure that America works for 100% of the people here in the shortest time possible without ecological offense, making sure nobody gets left behind or kept behind and everybody lives the good life. We're giving ourselves a proper intended use for our economy. We're trying to achieve the stewardship initiatives, to achieve welfare and stewardship. We're giving our government a proper intended use in terms of we're trying to reinforce and solidify and foster the criterion echelon of society so that we can grow out expansively, however we want to, advance in our society and our civilization, but we're doing so in a way that is sustainable, and it's just, and it's peaceful, and it's fair. And the entire sense is that we are becoming the living answer to how do we as a collective create a collective cultural shift of the whole of humanity to align and in tune with an ever more healthy, sustainable, just, and peaceful world. And we're starting here in America, and we're doing so by becoming welfaring stewards. And we're taking on this sense that our American way of life is really about making sure that we're doing the things that we have to do at the right time, the right way, for the right reasons. And that we're making sure that we're not factioning off and separating ourselves, based off of political parties. It's okay to have different ideas and wants and needs and ways to approach stuff, but we should have healthy dialogue and debate about what is the best practices, and not base it off of, one party has to have control or the other. It should be, we need to find the best practices and make sure that everybody becomes the responsible party. So we're taking on responsibility to get the things done that we need to have done. And so that's my approach. I really believe that this is the best way to move forward in America. It gets us out of our heads in terms of the factioning of political parties and ideologies, and it gives us a set trajectory and a grander vision of the future and a grand strategy by which we can get there. And it's tangible things that we can build towards, things that we know in our hearts that we want and we need. The sense of the Mighty Great Care package, being able to help people to have affordability in their cost of living instead of piecemeal solutions of trying to bring down the cost of groceries and trying to bring down the cost of childcare and cost of healthcare. It's we're pulling our resources and we're making sure this is accessible to everybody. And the affordability concept comes with the accessibility of it. And we're executing on those things that we know are going to up-level our lives and improve the American situation and increase the standard of our living, so that that criterion echelon expands and grows more and more. And then we give ourselves opportunities to grow out more potentials in terms of prospects of up-leveling everybody's lives and building out these initiatives that becomes a scaffolding for people's lives to be able to build up on, so they can up-level to the point where they can reach, if they choose, and they're so ambitious to reach the upper echelons of society and help us to pioneer and push for, even greater feats of human capacity, really tune in with our human ingenuity and see what we can become when we all focus together on becoming our best versions individually and collectively. So with that, I'm really grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration. I know I've kind of had to speed up the process here at the end, but I'm getting ready to run out of space to be able to continue this video. I am enthusiastic about the future. I am so excited about the idea of becoming president. I really want to be able to lead America into a future that is conducive to our well-being, and I want to continue to champion for these causes that I believe are super important, because this is something that's holistic in terms of, everybody belongs and everybody has a place to belong, and everybody has a part in this process of development, and it becomes our collective shared responsibility and our living legacy. It's an entire adventure, and it's exciting and it's thrilling, and it doesn't have to be this drudgery, and we don't have to fight with one another. We can just embrace this change together and wholly integrate it and grasp it fully and let go of our shitty past of our infighting with one another, and like let it go and forgive and move on and set our trajectory towards our sights, towards where we're going, and understand where we've been and not forget where we've come from. But you know, you can make progress by looking back and looking ahead. And what I'm hoping for is to get everybody focused on looking ahead of where we're going, because I know where I'm going and I want you to come too. And I know that I can't, but we can. So with that, I'm grateful again for your valuable time, attention, and consideration. I can't wait to tell you more in the next video. Until then, be well.